Okay, good. So let's get started.
Yeah.
Good morning. Today's October 15, 2019. I'm George Ristau, the managing broker at Weichert Realtors, All Pros, Chicago office. We're here in our social media studio with Gino Pronos, our director of social media. Say good morning, Gino.
Morning, everybody.
Good, good. Gino, any special items that we are going to address today before I get off on my own tangent?
Well, like you said, I'm not really keeping up with what's going on in the outside world. I'm stuck here in my little cave all the time with no windows, no clocks. I don't know what's going on out there, so you're gonna have to fill me in.
Good, good. Well, let's start with October 15 is a big day for some. If you have not filed your taxes, your income taxes, today's your absolute deadline without the possibility of incurring some penalties or a fine along the way. Most people know April 15 as the tax date, and most Americans do file on that date. However, there are extensions available. So if you opted to get extensions along the way, you could get usually an initial extension and then a final extension. But today's the absolute deadline to get those taxes filed.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, important to remember. Always file them, even if you don't have the money on it. File the taxes because then you can avoid some penalties, and you may be penalized for being late, but you certainly don't want to not carry your fair share on a national basis. It's our duty as Americans to pay our taxes, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. So I think it's good. This is a good place to start because if you're an agent, you're going to be considered an independent contractor, so your tax filing situation is going to be a little different, maybe than what some people are used to, just filing with their W-2s. So I know you're not an accountant, so I mean, but you do have experience doing this, so maybe you can give everyone a quick breakdown of some of the differences and some stuff to be aware of.
Sure, sure. One of the things that is we have a number of new agents that have been recruited into the company over the last couple of years. We have probably in the neighborhood of about 20 to 25 new agents that have joined our company. It's important for them to realize that they're going to be transitioning from the norm of having someone hold their taxes for them through withholding, as you mentioned, on a W-2, to where they're paying their own taxes and their own self-employment tax on on their earnings. So it is a good policy, in my opinion, to isolate the funds immediately. And so as soon as you get a check, if you can set up a separate account, that could be a checking account just for your real estate business itself, helps to keep it isolated, or you could set up a passbook account. They still have those. Just as a matter of fact, there are still a few places out there that have passbooks. So if you do that, you can get a couple of checks cut or have the funds isolated and then put what you think is the appropriate amount into the passbook account. Then when your timeline comes in to make your estimated payments, the money will be there on it. Your first year, usually there's, because you're going through the process, you don't have to necessarily anticipate what you're going to make because your earnings can vary pretty substantially on it. But by the second year around, then you should be making for sure your estimated payments, and then they ultimately will correspond with with the calendar dates that are there. So April 15 for a first one, June 15 for your second, September 15 for your third, and then coming around to the next year, January 15 of the following year would be your fourth, and that's where you should settle up and put your final adjustment in to make sure that plus or minus that you're paying the appropriate amount. And then when your accountant does your returns later, then there's in their program it will identify whether you've made the right amount of estimates or if you're a little bit high or a little bit low, and that'll go into your final filing for the year. So long answer to a short question, but hopefully somewhat detailed.
Definitely very detailed. So as an independent contractor, you're required to basically file and pay your taxes quarterly.
Eventually, yeah, you're supposed to make estimated payments on it 4 times per year.
Right.
There are earnings requirements there, so I don't know what the threshold is these days, but if you're below a certain amount, then you don't have to do it. But
Mm.
for the most part, you do that, and you just send an estimate. You get a coupon when your taxes are completed by your accountant, and then there should be 4 coupons that are in there, and you just write the check there separately. But that's why I said if you have it in an isolated account, it's easier. You can just go to your isolated account and then transfer it back into your checking and write the check right out of your checking account, and you won't have the scenarios. Most individuals in this business, because our paydays are erratic based on closings, they get a check and then they spend the money because they're paying past bills that might be out there or trying to do something for the future. And so one of the things that really crimps the style of many, many real estate professionals is even though they're producing high revenues and lots of sales and bringing a lot of money in, it's expensive to live in our country with the self-employment tax also being added into the mix. And then you are really in a position where you need to get a handle on that. And upfront is the easiest way to do it. Again, if you don't see it, it's less likely that you're going to spend it. And if it's isolated, then you have a good track record. You have a good way to go back and identify the monies that are there if that was ever the case in an audit requested by IRS.
And there's certainly accounting tools out there that can help you keep track of everything, keep organized, like a QuickBooks or, I'm sure there's many just like that. But as long as you log everything as you go, it can kind of help you stay on track and give you a snapshot of what you may need to pay. So you may be aware of the exact numbers that you need to hit. So you're not spending the money, like you said, and then come tax time, you don't have the cash because you spent it.
Right.
So you can't pay your taxes. So maybe it's a good idea to sign up for one of those services. I don't know if you've ever used those in the past, but I'm currently signed up with QuickBooks.
Okay, good.
And so they basically do exactly what I said. As long as you're logging your income, they'll break down your quarterly payments, and then you can actually pay it quarterly. And it's kind of more of a set it and forget it thing instead of having to keep track all year and then, go put everything through your accountant. Just kind of streamlines everything, helps you keep organized. So for a low fee, it might be worth the convenience.
Yeah, I'd agree. And one of the other things you can do is, obviously, we have business expenses because we're in the real estate business. So a checkbook or a debit card or whatever way you want to track in an isolated account is also a good way. Anything that you can do to isolate your personal expenses from your business expenses is good. Good for future audit purposes because it's showing you're doing your due diligence to separate your personal life from your business. And then what I'd recommend too is if you have the luxury of having 2 credit cards or more, if you take one of the credit cards potentially there and just use that for what you perceive to be your business expenses on it, then you'll be in a position you have a good log of that. You don't have to go back and isolate what you spent and where you spent the money.
So the nice thing about these tools, because you would basically link your account or accounts to it. So you see everything that comes in, and then you're able to easily select if it's a personal or a business expense. Right. So then come tax time, everything is, again, organized very well. So it makes it easier for you.
Good.
Or you could just be old school and write everything down in a checkbook. I don't even have a checkbook. I don't even know if I've ever written a check in my life, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It still works. The bank still accepts it.
They still accept them.
They still accept it, and you can put it in as a deposit, and you can also write the checks back out. Obviously, you're going to do whatever feels the most comfortable for you. But I like the isolation scenario because if you've isolated properly with whatever the expenses are, then if you are requested or if it's required to bring those documents and that information in at a later point, it's easier because you can just say this is isolated and this is just what I do, for my business only. And if you have a cumulative checkbook that has everything in there, or an accounting system that has everything in, and then later you have to pick and choose, sometimes it's just easier to do it on the spot. You're out for a business lunch with someone, you may have the ability for deductibility. On that, they've changed the tax rules of late, but you can still, from an entertainment perspective for meals, have a deduction taken against your income, and that can be something you just deal with, as you go. But either way works. It's just whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is all well and good for people as long as they've got income coming in.
Yes.
Which and none of this is very relevant until they actually start generating some of these checks that they can manage. So, for someone who's brand new, what is something that an agent should do on day one to try to generate their first lead, get their first client? Very basic stuff, I imagine, is what you're gonna say, because fundamentals are going to be key in this, like anything else. So, if you just hired a new agent and they come to you and say, George, what do I do? I don't know. What would you tell them?
Well, first thing I'd do is I'd want to get them enrolled in one of our training programs, which we have basically 2 levels of training here at the office. We have a corporate training level, which kicks off and gives a good overview of the way the business works. And coupled with that, then we have our own spin that we put on it, which is our All Pro spin, where we separately train agents to be prepared for the rigors of the business. The most important thing that you can do in this business, in my opinion, is to get started with prospecting very quickly in the game. And there's all different ways to prospect. One of the ways that is good for immediate opportunities would be to look at your sphere of influence that you might have. This would be individuals that you've met along life's journey. Could be candidates that you went to grade school with, or high school, or college, or a social group, or a team that you played on, or any of those groups that could be out there. Could be church connection, could be extracurriculars that you participated over the years, or just really any grouping that's there. And if you are in a position that you have the connection with them from the past, they can, if properly approached, they can either become a client or might be able to be your advocate as you move forward in the real estate journey. So I would say getting that grouping going quickly, and then also getting on the phone to individuals, I think, is good. Some prefer texting. Some in the past, I guess, used to use email. I guess we've kind of passed through the email phase. Somehow we missed that one.
You're going to have to let that one go.
A little bit along the way. But no, really any vehicle is good to be able to get to those individuals. I like a personal connection with them. Again, everyone communicates in a different fashion. But I'd get the word out, and I would do it personally if it was me and if I was getting started in the business, just to let individuals know quickly that I'm in the business, that I'm enthusiastic, that I have support at the company that I'm working at now, and that if they have a need for real estate services, we can fill the need for them.
So it's always going to be much, much easier to reach out to people that you know on a personal level, right? So if nothing else, they're going to be more willing to listen to you just because they may like you as a person, even if they don't actually need your services yet. So that's always a great place to start. But what happens when you go through your whole sphere of influence and at that time nobody actually needs your services and you have to start prospecting, cold? What's a good place to start there?
I've done everything. Of course, I've had a long career. I've knocked on doors of neighborhood businesses where I've just gone up and down each of the main streets and said hello and left my business card, because local businesses can also be a great opportunity. And many times the local business person is overlooked because they don't have direct contact and they're trying to do business too. Mm-hmm. So if you have the local cleaners or the barber or the beauty salon or wherever you happen to use regular services, that's a great opportunity to say hello to those folks. Restaurants, perhaps you take somebody out to a business lunch. Coffee shops, you might go have a cup of coffee with somebody along the way. If you meet those individuals, if you meet those managers, if you meet those employees along the way, I just got a flat tire last week, and I stopped in at a local repair shop, and I stopped in. I didn't know the place. We just needed to get it done right away, and I wound up coincidentally meeting the manager. Gave the manager my card, said hello, and then it happened to be his birthday. So we gave him a little birthday thank you along the way, which I'm sure was something they didn't expect. But it's just a matter of building goodwill along the way. And if you build enough goodwill, then you're going to be in a position where ultimately that's going to come back to you. That's always been my experience.
Mm. So I think maybe if people rewire their mindset a little bit, in that instead of thinking that they're going to just directly say, "Hey, I'm in real estate now. Do you need my services?" Maybe you should think of it as start putting effort into turning people into advocates for you. So maybe if you were to approach local businesses, you wouldn't just say, "Can I leave my cards here because I'm a realtor? If anyone cares, or if you can spread the word for me, I need some business." Maybe you can do something nice for them without asking them for anything in return.
Sure.
And just try to do things that maybe will indirectly benefit you later, as far as real estate goes.
Yep. Yeah. And small independents are always good because, like anyone that has a small business in America, it's not easy to make it in a small business. So ultimately, those individuals are going to certainly appreciate your participation and your advocacy also. If you can make contact with them, we always encourage individuals to come up with a list of vendors. Perhaps you meet a painter along the way that does exceptionally good work, or an electrician, or anyone that's in the trades. They can be great sources of referral, but that you can also provide them with business too. So as these things develop, a lot of times it's a two-way street along the way. In the past, I used a cleaners along the way, dry cleaners for my shirts. So every week I would be in there. Eventually, you saying hello to folks, and eventually they called me because they knew that I was in the real estate business. So when they had a real estate need, then they called, and I was able to assist them. So you have to take the long vision on many of these items. It's not where you're going to generate necessarily immediate business, but in my opinion, if you take the long vision on enough people, then eventually the long vision turns into the short vision, and then ultimately you get some business from each of those. There is no magic bullet. There's no special secret sauce that's out there that's going to work every time. In my opinion, I think documentation of those things is really important, though. If you can figure out a way to say, "Oh, where was I today?" and then you can actually document those. And then you're going to note that. And ultimately, if you can do your prospecting so that you have consistency with it. I don't care whether it's 15 minutes a day or an hour a day or whatever the timeline is. If you set the stage and say, "Hey, this week I just want to meet 10 people, and how am I going to meet them? And if I meet them, and if I can shake their hand, and if I can tell them I'm in the business and I can offer them my services, or also say that I would like to be able to recommend my customers, my clients to them," then it does become a two-way street, and ultimately that's usually beneficial to both parties.
You said something very important there that people might have missed, but since this is such a high-touch game, you might very easily lose track of what you did, who you talked to, where you went, over time. So you may just forget, and then you may not be able to follow up later because you've talked to so many people,
right?
And that may hurt you because I think a lot of the success is going to be in the follow-up. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. A one-time contact, one-time touch, as they call it in this business, is nice. But there's an old saying in advertising that if you have not had at least 7 contacts with individuals, they're not going to remember you. And those were in the days when there weren't many contacts available. So if you had a television commercial, maybe on the 7th time, they would recognize your product.
Right.
But these days, with so much and so many options available media-wise, and individuals somewhat, if you permit that to happen, becoming barraged with items that are out there all the time. Even when you have your phone open, how many different solicitations do you receive, just in a very short time frame, or how many calls are you getting? So again, to try to get and crack that level, it's going to take more than just a casual connection. You're going to have to be in the mix with them along the way.
Yeah. So this is exactly the transition that we're making that we started talking about last week. But I think it's now more important than ever to not present yourself as this character, as this real estate professional. And it's much more important now to present yourself as a human being, because people, just like you said, they're being solicited to every second of every day. Every website you go on, you're being solicited to. Every time you go on Facebook or any social media platform, all you see are ads. Okay, so there's endless possibilities. On top of that, the consumer is much more educated than ever, because they can just pull out their phone, Google anything that they want to know, and instantly find the information. So I think if you're a client services professional, it's so much more important now to be more personable with people, actually build a relationship, which is a very classic thing to say in this business. But now that we have all these tools available, you can actually do that at scale much more quickly, much more effectively, I think. So instead of calling 100 people 10 times to make those 10 touches, like you said, you can actually just do something like this. Like make a podcast, or do a video show, or whatever it is. There's endless possibilities, but I think what's key is that you actually are more of a human being than I call it a character. Like you put on the suit, you present yourself as a very professional person, and that's great. But I don't think people care very much about that, just because there's so many options. So it's hard to make them care about that. But it's easier to make them care about you as a human being if you connect to them on a personal level.
I completely agree. And I think that the question where everything comes into blend is that, as you had said earlier, do you want to portray yourself as this character, or do you just want to really be this character? Do you want to be this human being? And if you can just be yourself, then that sincerity and that honesty and that integrity hopefully will reach out to enough individuals, so that, again, you're not living the tale of being a certain character, but rather you're in a position where you are just being yourself.
Yes.
And hopefully connecting to individuals on a personal level there. Hopefully we're saying the same thing. I think we are.
No, I think we definitely are. Now, one small thing is that when if you approach somebody cold, you never met them before, how important is it to present yourself in a certain way? Okay, because I think that people are influenced by that. I think they will make a snap judgment on you. If you walk up to them in sweatpants, or versus walking up to them in a nice suit, they're going to make a snap judgment. And maybe they'll listen to your spiel after that, but I think they've already made up their mind whether or not that they want to work with you because of something so silly. Now, I always say it doesn't really make you a better realtor because you're wearing a suit, but I think, unfortunately, it does increase your chances of somebody working with you, especially if they don't know you. So, but now if you're somebody who doesn't normally wear suits, for example, is it important there to be yourself and be authentic and be okay with the fact that some people may not want to work with you because of that, even though I think it's wrong? Or is it better to just see the bigger picture and put on that suit and just to increase your chances of getting business?
That's that always goes back to the individual's personal feelings and their own feeling about what they are and what they want to be. There is, as I said before, no special way that works for everyone. You can be the rebel without a cause out there. You can be the complete professional, and many of those individuals are going to be in all different shapes and varieties. I think one of the things to probably take a look at is looking towards the middle. So if you look towards the middle and you find yourself completely isolated on either side of where the middle of America happens to be, then you might find yourself a little bit out in the cold, because human nature is such that many, many times we want to do business with someone that we see that's in our own likeness. Because we have comfortable feelings about that, or we want to do business with someone where it's our vision that we think that they're going to handle our business in an appropriate fashion. And I guess, just historically over the last many years, then individuals, higher end professionals, have just worn, say, a suit and a tie, along the way.
Yeah.
And it appears that, that they've had success. However, there's plenty of CEOs and multi-billionaires that are out there that are on the other side, of the equation. So I think you can do it either way. I think it's just your own personal business. And I think it's kind of a trial and error opportunity that's out there. You don't know who you're going to meet. And obviously, if you were in say, a riding group, I have a client right now that said he's out of town and he's on his bike. Well, I had this vision of him going on a bike trail up and down some trees, but then later I found out he was riding his motorcycle, that was out there, and he just referenced it, of course, as a bike. So you can have just different groups of individuals that you can connect to, and I have that in my personal life. I've got all different types of individuals that do different things, and we all kind of blend at some point, hopefully with a common theme and common values that we would have. And those are the things that eventually link you together. But as you said, first impression is really important. So if you can't get past the first impression with someone, you're really not going to be able to go deep and have that that relationship that's going to get established down the road.
Exactly.
How's that sound?
Exactly. But that's where you hit your first crossroad. Okay, well, I can't speak for anyone else, but that's where I usually hit my first crossroad sometimes, because if I meet someone for the first time, I've never done this exactly, but if I walked up to somebody, I look kind of like a slob, like I'm wearing sweatpants or something, I'm trying to ask them for business. Obviously, it doesn't match up, right? Like someone wouldn't really reasonably make a connection that I'm a professional person, I'm going to do a good job for them just because of something like that. So, but if I was someone who, dressed a certain way, or, talked a certain way, or, had a certain style about myself, it's tempting to kind of try to mold yourself to what you think that person wants you to be. So I don't know, if you like this guy that you were just talking about, he's in a biker club or something like that. So maybe he wears, I don't know anything about biker clubs, but maybe he wears more appropriate attire, like whatever bikers wear, leather vests and whatever like that. Let's go to the extreme, like it's the Mayans movie or a TV show. But in real life, if he's talking to somebody, he probably shouldn't be dressed like that. He probably should be dressed more professional, which I hate that word, but
I think it's just it's going to come down to the individual scenarios that are there, and I think we all are in a position that we make those preliminary judgments, as we go through.
Just bottom line it for me. Is it better to just be yourself authentically all the time, so don't care what anyone thinks and be okay with them judging you and saying no, or should the skill be remaining light on your feet and being able to adjust to all different types of people?
I think we always have to be adaptable and adjustable in order to survive, because we're going to be dealing with so many different types of human experiences there. And as I said, again, if you kind of figure out what the middle is, and then you have to be true to yourself along the way, then sometimes there's a blending that can go on where you can do those things simultaneously along the way, sometimes not. And then ultimately, I think one of the things, especially from a business perspective, is trial and error. So you can sometimes try, certain fields, and then you may, not. If you had, say, a specific group of friends, for example, I have another friend that was for many years involved in scuba diving. He was part of a scuba diving club. Well, when those guys got together, they were in full uniform on it. So they had the scuba, they had the swimming pool, or wherever they were going diving. If you took that group and then you looked at them within their own group of 20 or 30 or 40, you'd say, wow, it's just a group of all different individuals that are wearing this scuba gear. And it would be kind of hard to again, track them along the way. But they all wind up splintering out and doing other things, and perhaps in their own profession. they're wearing a suit and tie. Maybe they're just wearing a polo shirt
Mhm.
along the way. So I don't know if you can do the specific tracking, but if you're part of a social network and whatever it is for that network, you can feel real comfortable because you're in your mode of what's there. But again, if you're going back into the general appeal of the public, falling somewhere within acceptable social means is probably going to be your most effective business
Mhm.
scenario. No guarantees. It all still comes down to meeting a lot of people and then having your own personality and your own twist, which is going to separate you from many of the others that are somewhat vanilla out there. I don't think there's anything the matter
Mhm.
with Neapolitan ice cream. I think that
Yeah.
that's good. You got variety. On the flip side, if you get started along the way, then you want to make sure that you continue to keep evaluating what you're doing on a regular basis.
Mhm. So you can certainly prospect just through your daily activities that you'd be doing anyway. So if you are in a scuba club, obviously in that case, everyone's in scuba gear and everyone's talking about, that world and everything. So you can prospect there, and then it's an easier question to answer. But if you're just committing time every day or every week to prospecting for your business only, and you're blocking out very specific chunks of time, you're is it is it better to just kind of stay down the middle and appeal to everybody, like you said, or should you just be yourself and wear, scuba t-shirts and, you know, sweatpants if that's what you wear?
Again, if you're out in a business environment, who are you connecting with is going to be the
Right.
target. If you're connecting with business owners on the street and you're going to be stopping in, there, then they're going to perceive you in the way that you present yourself.
Right.
So whatever way you want to be presented, then I think you're going to try to match that up along the way. If you're going to a Wolves hockey game, then they may not anticipate seeing you in a three-piece suit. You might
Yes.
be in Wolves gear and cheering for your favorite independent hockey team or any of those things. So I think it just matches up to the environment that you happen to be in. On it. If you're doing door-to-door canvassing, when you're out on the street, contacting, inviting folks, say, to come to an open house or whatever, wherever the real estate call happens to be, then of course I think you want to be in a position where you have somewhat of a professional feel, whether that's wearing a suit and tie or whether that's just wearing something like business casual as they call it today, or something that looks somewhat professional is probably going to be preferable
Mhm.
than being in a position where you're out there in your jogging shorts and inviting
Yeah.
folks to come into an event.
We keep using attire as the example here, but this really applies to any part of your presentation, your personality, your looks, like I said, how you speak, anything. And everyone's obviously going to be very unique and have their own style. Okay, but I think it's very tempting for people to try to stay right down the middle and kind of become this professional character, like I was saying, where if you take 10 people in real life, they're very, very different, very unique. But when they're in their business mode, they're all going to kind of more or less look and sound the same, which I think is a very dangerous game to play, even though it's very tempting.
Well, unless you can really connect, in my experience, with the client on a personal basis, then I don't think most clients just want to deal with the professional side. They may that might get you in the door, but to eventually make the sale,
Mhm.
which is to relate to them, to go deep, and be in a position where you have some connection to them, then that's really going to be part of your interview process when you're sitting with a buyer or a seller. If you just go right into the business aspect of it, that's fine. It might work for
Mhm.
some, but if you are able to find out a little bit more about the client, be it buyer or seller, their personal interests, tell me a little bit about yourself, let me tell you a little bit about myself, you might connect on some basis that you're not anticipating. And that connection alone
Mhm.
might be enough to differentiate you from maybe the competition, which is all presenting themselves in the same fashion. So that's
Mhm.
just a little example I've had. And it's not really a business tactic. If you like people, if you want to be interested in your client, if the client's interested in you, you can share that information, along the way, or or be in a position that you can at least ask the questions and see what the folks want to do, if they want to share, or not. And then again, you can always give them a little bit of background about your own history, whatever that happens to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to speak from my own personal experience, as well as from the perspective of a new agent. Because, like I said, it's very tempting to leave your personality at the door and become more of a robot and make a presentation to people. And then I think as you get better and gain experience, you get looser and you open up more, and you're just much lighter on your feet because you know how to handle objections. I think
Right.
is one of the biggest things.
I would
But
agree.
when you're new, it's very tempting. It was for me to just pretty much almost script a presentation and say the same thing more or less to everybody. And I noticed everyone's just kind of looking at me falling asleep. No one seemed to really care very much about all the little tactics, although valuable and useful, but they just didn't really seem to care very much about the business, right? It's almost as if they already assumed that I'm going to do a good job and that I'm a professional, that I know what I'm doing. I'm going to know how to sell their house, basically. But yet my presentation's all about how I'm going to sell their house. But they just don't seem to care about that very much. They seem to care more about me, the human being.
Yeah, and that's fine. You got, again, as you mentioned, light on your feet. You just need to be in a position that you can have a good connection with the client, answer their questions, and then also be in a position where they feel comfortable, working with you. And that's the whole you, or that's the whole agent that we have, working at our company to make sure that each of them is not robotic, but rather is in a position where they know the basics of the business so that they can explain it to those individuals that have a lot of questions. Many times individuals say, hey, I haven't done this for 30 years. Can you tell me, give me the basics? How do we do this? And I have other individuals that have a deeper understanding of the business itself. And each of those conversations takes on its own life. It's hard to predict,
Yes.
where you're going to wind up going down the road, as we go on it. How about a final question, Gino, before I have a final little wrap up here? Do you have anything else for me that you're thinking about today?
Well, outside of what we've been talking about, nothing comes to mind.
Okay.
I just want to make one final point actually about it, and then we can leave it at that, I guess. But I think all this stuff becomes so much more important just because people have so many options that you touched on earlier. There's so many more avenues people can go with the media and like I said, with the internet as a whole. So I think it's just better for people, in my very humble opinion, to not present yourself like this character, like this real estate professional, whatever that even means, because that's going to mean something different to everybody, but to almost as if to think of it as the less you talk about real estate when you sit down with someone, the more likely it's going to be that you get real estate business, which I think is tough for people to accept on day one because A, they don't know any better, they don't have any experience, and then it's just easier to revert to that, to just talk about real estate as much as you can, make your presentation crisp and almost create your script, like I said. But I think the less that you do that, the more likely it'll be that you will have success early on. That's how I feel.
Good.
So
Good.
That's it.
Well, that I think again is the comfort level that each of us has as we go through presentations, as we meet buyers, we meet potential sellers, and we certainly want to be in a position that we can answer their questions and again have them develop that comfort level that's there, for all of us. Final thoughts today as we recap the Nationals team winning their third game last night against the dreaded Cardinals. They're looking at a sweep. Whether that's going to happen or not, the Cardinals always seem like they come up with some surprise out of the hat, but really just doing more of an acknowledgement from a kid from the neighborhood. And when my brother Johnny, youngest brother, was a freshman at high school at Holy Cross High School, which is now the successor school is Garin Prep. But when Johnny was in high school, he started on the basketball team. And the guard that played across from him, Johnny, was a point guard, and his name was Mike. And Mike is very prominent today because he continued his career at Holy Cross, wound up continuing on the baseball team, actually, and not so much basketball, but he became a good baseball player, eventually got into scouting on the baseball side, became very well known as the scout that signed Frank Thomas for the Chicago White Sox, for any White Sox fans that are out there. Continued after that, and has made his way from the Diamondbacks to now being the general manager of the Washington Nationals. So if you do watch a baseball game and they're always panning the booth and they mention the name Mike Rizzo, Mike's a kid that was right from the neighborhood, right from the Shabona Park area, and wound up going through neighborhood schools at Holy Cross and has had a great career. And I guess that's our connection, not having the Cubs in this year. Mike probably was a Cub fan, I got to think, because he lived right off of Addison or Irving there. And might have. I'm hoping he was a Cub fan when he was growing up on the north side. But in any event, wound up becoming a very, very prominent person that we see out there with baseball. So good luck, Mike, with the Nationals, and we'll see where you wind up if you win the National League Series, and then again have to go as a heavy underdog against the American League team. That series is now tied with the Astros and the Yankees at a 1-1 pace on that one. So we'll see how that one plays out. But always good to have just a regular guy from the neighborhood wind up to have such success in his given field. So that's going to be the end of today's meeting. Gino, thanks again for your questions and for putting the presentation together for us today.
Thank you, George.
Okay, let's have a great day.